both Kira and I have heard the same stories of Jane and Iffy, of hearing Jane say, I can't believe it, I've been completely dumped by my friend. She's got married and I basically haven't seen her for 6 months. And I just got a sort of very bland, how are you doing? And I haven't really heard anything since. And equally, we've also heard the Iffy of saying, I feel like all of my single friends have basically just run for the hills, don't seem to want anything to do with me anymore. And I just feel completely abandoned by them. And I think one of the things we'd want to just, what I'd want to just engage with just for a moment is this idea, again, to challenge the single people, having worked particularly in marriage ministry for so long. I know Tim and Joe here tonight, they've done a lot more work in this area than I have, that marriage isn't a solution to people's problems, it's the creation of lots of new ones. It's wonderful, but it is fraught with challenge. And so, again, I think one of the myths around being a single Christian in a culture which has such a high view of marriage is that people who get married are almost desperate to tell you how wonderful it is because they want to kind of keep that alive. They don't want to talk marriage down, which I completely understand. But the danger is you end up with a sort of fairy tale view of marriage, which everyone has to keep up appearances with. And so when things are difficult, they don't tend to be very honest with their single friends because they almost feel like, oh, I can't believe now I'm going to start complaining about the very thing that I've spent years longing for, if you're one of those people who've been looking for a relationship.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, what do you think, Will, about the kind of married people being able to talk to and open up about their marriage to, their single friend or single people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an area that needs wisdom. And I think the issue is not whether you're married or single, it's about whether you've got wisdom to speak into relationship. And I've got some single friends who are just amazingly insightful about relationship, even though they're not in relationship. And that's great. So it's looking for the people with wisdom who actually have the wisdom to support you. And I know, I'm sort of very connected to the sort of psychotherapeutic world as well. And lots of those people are single people who are offering brilliant insights and wisdom into relationships which they haven't themselves encountered. But if you think about it, it's ridiculous to say you have to have personally encountered everything if you're going to help anyone with anything. Well, you wouldn't find anyone who could help you with anything because no one's experienced everything that you've experienced. So wisdom is one thing, and then the relational dynamic is almost something else. Again, in the context of saying also you have to have wisdom. So if you're a married person and then you spend a huge amount of time with a single person and you believe or you start to feel that there's something going on that's greater than the platonic friendship, then you need to respond to that very dynamically. And that is also a real phenomenon. So, but it's not the reason we should hive one another off from one another and say, oh, well, I'm not going to have anything to do with anyone else then. So I do think that there can be really honest conversations and really helpful conversations. But I think, again, it's about the quality of relationship that exists between people, that you're only going to talk, you're only going to talk to someone about your marriage if you've got a deep relationship with them and you actually understand one another and empathize with one another. But there's just so many insights and so much gold that can go both ways in these conversations. They're not about siloizing any particular person and saying, well, you can't help me in any way. And I just wish married people were a bit more honest as well about some of the challenges of marriage. So single people were also more aware that it's not sort of all of that you think it might be, because someone might be sitting at home feeling really lonely and really sad and just be desperate for a single friend to call them. If they could just open up about that rather than saying, oh, it's amazing, marriage is great, it's wonderful, I'm having a fantastic time, what do you think? Then all would be good, we'd be so much more connected together. So that's, it's such an important piece of work. But I just hope that maybe tonight when you had that conversation, you were thinking, oh yeah, there's that friend I'd love to call just to say, hey, I've missed you, let's hang out again, whatever it is.
Yeah.
We're going to push into this idea of preferment for a little while. But
Does everyone know what preferment is?
So yeah, let's talk about that. So we talked a bit in opening about this idea that the church at large sometimes have overemphasized marriage as being a right to participate and maybe made singleness feel like a problem rather than just a normal state of being. And preferment's the idea that you might prefer someone who's married to participate in leadership in some way over someone who's single. And so, I just wondered if you had, what your experience of preferment had been as a woman, a single woman in senior leadership in the church.
I think overall I've had a really good experience in general. In a church where they really value kind of raising up leaders who have been previously sort of ignored or not represented. But there is sometimes, and I think it's still an element of sort of a bit of subconscious or unconscious bias towards certain things, where often it's the sort of the most senior leader is often would often sort of be a man, or if it's like, oh, that's a married couple, we'll have them, whichever one is ordained, and historically it was tend to be the man who was ordained, and automatically his wife is then drawn in on this journey of ministry and is given that platform and things like that. And I think it just depends. It depends obviously on the ministry, but I'm seeing that changing. It was an interesting thing coming from a not kind of faith background, that my sort of certainly my gender, and I think to a large extent in the secular world, I would say, your promotions and things like that are never, but based on your relationship status has nothing to do with that. Nobody's allowed to ask you. Whereas in the church, there is a very different. Single clergy are very much still in the minority, and then female single clergy, it's like there's not many of us knocking around.
Yeah, I guess my reflection on that is that we obviously, I think the church has been really blessed by coupled ministry over the years, and I'm just very aware of the sort of amazing sacrifice that so many clergy spouses have made, and that's been quite a patriarchal system. So many clergy spouses have been so sacrificial in sort of serving the church as a kind of plus one and doing all of this work, but that has coincidentally created a culture again where single people look on and go, that's the model of leadership. And I think it's one of those classic things where if you don't see yourself represented in the room, you make all sorts of assumptions around the assumptions that have been made around your participation. And this has been so important, engaging over the last couple of years with Black Lives Matter about what actually racial representation looks like, and just waking up to the fact that if you don't see people like you in positions of leadership, you're immediately making views on, or often rightly assuming that you're not welcome necessarily to participate fully. So things have got to change so representation demonstrates that everyone can participate. Otherwise, we just coincidentally propagate, even through goodwill and good practice, the same sort of cycle of exclusion. So I think that's, it's great to have you, Kira, in Christian leadership. I'm sure everyone feels like that tonight. What should someone do if they feel that they're being excluded from opportunity in the church that they really long for because of their relationship status, for example?
Yeah, I think it's a question of asking good questions and looking at sort of being quite practical about it and saying, well, what is it that I really want to get into? There are certain things that might lend themselves. I don't feel particularly cool that I want to sort of get into, for example, a parenting or marriage course. Obviously, if there's a married couple who've been married a long time and things like that who are going to lead the marriage course, fair enough. I'm not going to be trying to pretend that I might know more than that. So there is an element of what is it that what ministries that you might be suited to or not, better suited to or better experienced in. But I think a lot of the time when we said it's sometimes subconscious, or it's not, people don't realize it's completely unintentional. And so sometimes it's just asking the really good question of, oh, I'm really curious as to, I would love to get involved in this. What do you think? Can I, raising the awareness of it probably will do a huge amount to your leadership within your church, and just think, oh yeah, actually I hadn't thought about that. Of course you can get involved. that is, it's really just drawing attention to it in a really kind, honouring way, I think.
And I guess from a leadership perspective, it's also about recognising that whilst singleness might be a reason that you're not invited to participate in a ministry that might seem obvious to you, it's not the only reason. And so, again, I think it's really important to sort of say...
It's not about your singleness necessarily. You just might not be qualified to...
Yes. So again, I mean, sometimes, and I think I've experienced this, where people have said, is it because I'm X that I can't participate? You're saying, no, not at all. It's because you're not qualified to participate in this because I've got questions about your character. Did you want me to say that? Is that better? But I think again, I think we have to be very alive to being excluded from participation for the wrong reasons, but very aware that we might be excluded from participation for very good reasons. And actually, again, in the context of the church wanting to say, actually, asking questions about discipleship is so valuable. How can I be discipled so I can participate more fully in the life of this church? That's a great question to ask. Because what you're saying is, I'm coming in the authority of leadership to say, I want to be a disciple of Jesus. How can I be a more effective disciple? And those sort of questions, they often filter out or bring into the light prejudice. So if someone says, I just don't think you really fit in here, there's a problem with the leadership. Whereas if someone says, no, that's a question I really appreciate, like, let's talk about how we can disciple you into leadership in the context of the church, then immediately you're having a much, much more valuable and honest conversation. So I would encourage you, as Kira said, to recognise that preferment exists, but also to recognise that preferment isn't the only reason that you might not be participating, but probably the greatest gateway to your participation in the church is your own will. And sometimes, and I'm not wanting to put this on you, but sometimes we can avoid participation by overseeing preferment. So by saying, they don't want me because I'm single, they don't want me to participate in the kids ministry because I'm not married and haven't got kids. When actually we're going, please participate, we'd love you to be part of that, or please participate in the young adults ministry, or please help us with the old people's ministry or the homeless ministry of the church. So I think the will amongst church leaders that I meet is we are, especially post-COVID, longing for you to participate more deeply in the life of the church. But I would encourage you not to let preferment be a reason to not participate. And if your church leader is leaning in that direction, then definitely have the conversations that Kira has mentioned. We're going to get you to engage now in scenario 3, which is around the issue of preferment in Jane's experience of church, and to reflect on some of the things we've just said about your involvement, investment in the life of the church.